All right, welcome back. So, as you might guess, we could do this as an exercise somewhat. I won't do it as an official exercise, but just as an exercise, you could go ahead and try to add this menu yourself to call this model and the action required. But what we're going to do is go ahead and create this action in this menu so that you can see again how to do this. Remember, we created one already for diet items. So let's go ahead and open up our diet facts underscore view and see that we're already familiar with creating a form view. We're already familiar with creating a menu item, and we're familiar with creating an action, and that's what this record right here is that I'm selecting right now. This is an action record. So the two things we primarily need to display our new model that we've created, our new menu model, meal model, our new meal model, is a menu and an action. And then Odoo will throw in a default view and a default tree and a default form. It'll create those by default. They won't be pretty to look at, but it will give us a default one. So the minimum required is, first of all, the menu that we have to click on, and then we need an action that tells us what is going to happen. So let's copy our menu action that we have here, and we'll paste it. So it saves us from having to worry about a lot of the syntax. It's easier to change what's in here already. And so notice how this is product.product template. Well, we're not working with products anymore, so let's get rid of this and just call this action meal. And we don't need template because that was for the product as well. So we're going to just say meal action diet facts. That sounds better because this is to pull up our meal model. That's the model we've created, and this is going to call that action. And so now under our ID, this usually you just want to name kind of the same but put the menu in front of it. So I'll go like that, just copy and paste it. So why is this menu in front of this? Well, because this is the ID for the menu item. So I want to make it real clear. We're talking about the menu, and then this meal underscore action underscore diet facts is really the action that we're going to want. So I put it up here. Now you can name these whatever you want, but I'm just trying to get you in the habit of having good name conventions and have some consistency in how you name things, because it'll make it easier to look at. Because this parent doesn't have to change for us. We can just use that same menu we're in for now. And we can just put a sequence of 15 to go one higher. So this takes care of us making our menu right there. But we don't have an action for it yet. But we do have one, as you can see, that we made up here. So let's just copy it like that. Use Control-C, makes it a little easier as a shortcut. And paste. So what we want to do here is for this record ID, we know we want this to exactly match the action here because that's how it works. So I just Control-C to copy, and I can come up here and paste it like so. And we don't want this to be called diet items, obviously. We're going to call this meals. So those are our meals. Make sure we name this all meals. Meal action. I'm starting to call it meals rather than menus. Remember that these are our meals. And here, our model, our res underscore model name, is where we have to define the exact model we created. And we can go right over here, if we forgot, and see the name right here. And I can use my copy, Control-C to copy. Res.users.meal is the model that we want. And we can keep tree, Kanban form, we can keep form, but we don't need a view type here. So let's just get rid of it. We don't need a context and we don't need a domain. All three of these are optional. You'll use them a lot. But I can get rid of those and it will not break. And instead, Odoo will just give us default views for these items. And we don't really need this help, but we can go ahead in here and say click to define a new menu, just so we have some help in there, and get rid of the rest. So it'll say click to define a new meal. I love saying menu. Okay, so we have our meal action diet facts that ties down here to our menu. And when this menu gets hit, it's going to come up here and it's going to see what the model is, and it's going to have a recommended view listing that we want to have tree Kanban form. And that's all that Odoo really requires to have a model show up, or so we hope. So we're going to hit Control C and hit our up arrow and hit enter and restart it. And if nothing goes wrong with any of our form views, in other words, if there's no syntax issue in the views, then we're pretty good when we get past this, when it says loading it there. Now you'll notice here this computing parent left right for table IRU menu. You'll see this whenever you add XML that has to be processed, that's going to modify our menus. So everything we see here is good. You'll notice this warning where it says the model res user's meal has no access rules considering adding one. So this is a warning that tells us we have this new model called res.users meal, but we haven't defined any specific access rules. So what Odoo is going to do is really only let the admin user have access to it, which is okay for our development purposes for right now. And in a later lecture, we'll see how we can give access to the res.users meal through properly defining a file inside of our Odoo application. So we know that it's running now. Let's see if it worked. We click back on here, and here's a good time to use shift refresh, because anytime you're going to change a menu, you are always going to want to do a shift refresh so you'll see any of the changes. And you'll see that we do have a meals. We click on it, and there's our help. Click to define a new meal. Let's go ahead and do that. And we have a date, and let's just go ahead and pick today's date. And we have a meal user. Notice how we have a pop-up here, and there's the administrator user, because that's the only user we got in here. That's the only one we can pick. But as you can see, it's hooked in right now already into the interface, and it's ready to go. We just have to add the data. And so we'll call this, say, breakfast. And we can have any notes here that we want. And we can click save. And so just like that, we've added a model, and we've added a menu that lets us get to that model. And once we have a simple way to have a tree view here that comes up by default because of the way we wrote that action. And when we click on it, there's a generic form that Odoo gives us that we don't have to specify any details. It for our purposes gives us a way to edit our meal and give everything that we need in order to change the data in the model that we created. So just like that, you've got a new model, and remember we did it by adding this code right here after line 14. If you're new to Python, don't let it intimidate you. Just follow what's written here and understand that we're just giving a name to our model, and then we're specifying what fields we want in our model. And all of these start with fields, and you get to see multiple types here. We got a character type, we got a date time. Now we've introduced a many to one, so this is a new concept somewhat. And we went and saw that res.users is a list of users, and we've assigned that name for this user, the meal user. So every time we add a meal, we can have a different user. And we'll go ahead in a later video and explore that a little bit more. But for now, as you can see, we've got everything we need. And even in so far as Odoo is automatically creating the type, so you can see the text field is bigger here, so we can have more room to type notes. We have a list to pick our meal user. We can go ahead in here and just say Bob at our company. So now we can have another user, for example, be given a meal and tied to this meal record. We have a character field and we have a date time field with a date time picker. So Odoo does a lot of the hard work here. All we had to do to get all that information is just create these fields, tell Odoo what we want in our model, and then we had a little work to do here, copying and pasting these views. But remember, all we had to do was assign our action here in the ID to tie to our menu here. So that's how the menu is tied to the action, and this is how the model is tied to the view. So we're just building on what we've learned. We have our action here tied to our model, and we have our action here tied to our menu. And so now we can edit menus. So in our next video, we're going to go one step further, and we're going to learn how to add menu items. I should say meal items. We're going to have items for our meals, and that won't take as long as you might think. We're in a matter of minutes going to be able to have items tied to our meals that we'll be able to keep track of what we eat at each meal. So look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.